Welcome to our hormones class, take two evening. And we are so excited that you joined us and so glad that you joined us because hormones are all the rage. Ha ha ha, just kidding. So we know how much your hormones affect your body, and we know this is a huge topic for women and men alike. We are going to mostly focus on the ladies tonight, and have the honor of presenting Dr. Cynthia, or Cindy as we know her, Haggerton. And Cindy is a chiropractor and a midwife, as well as a mother of six children, ranging in many ages, I think from almost 1 to 13, if I remember correctly. And Cindy is amazing. So I don't want to waste any more time. So Cindy, I'm going to hand it over to you so you have as much time to speak as slowly as you would like and cover all the things we want to hear.
I was just thinking, I'm glad that my orders tonight are to talk about hormones and not try to pronounce all your town names, because you guys were popping those up. I was like, wow, there's a lot out there to read through, and I'm sure I would butcher them. So how are you guys? It is so humbling. We were talking about in the middle of the day yesterday, all of you who jumped on, and then to see that many on here tonight. Thank you for giving us whatever time of the day you're in right now. For us, it's evening. And so we never take that for granted. I know that I talk fast, but in this class especially, you guys probably should be cheering over that fact, because it is a tall order when you ask us to teach a class on hormones, because we're like, okay, what gender do we want to focus on? What stage in life? And then stage in life, there's usually, specifics that you want addressed in there. And so I hope that you have already gotten so much value off of the women who are joining in with me to teach these classes, because we are really working to tailor these to the needs that we hear out there. So if there's something that you would like us to present on, please let the person know who invited you to this class, and stay tuned, because tonight we're going to, if you were on yesterday's call or heard about it, you probably are aware of this, that we're going to scratch the surface on most things, delve a little bit deeper into some, and then at the end of the call, we'll talk to you guys about some things that we have coming up next month to specifically take a deeper dive into these topics, because we know that it is a lot. And we could, I feel like we were saying, prepping on these classes, which, pulling the curtain back for you guys, know that we don't just throw this information up there. There's a whole group of us jumping on Zooms to pre-prepare for this Zoom. And so I'm just so grateful to these Crosslines and leaders who have poured into me. And that's why we want to turn around and do the same, paying it back for you guys. But there's a lot of prep in this. And so as we were going through for this, we were like, man, there's so much information that we feel like we could cover, that we could literally do this every day of the month and still not get through it all. And so we know that we're about to throw a fire hydrant on you, but just swallow a little bit. And the whole goal, because we're all on different gamuts of this journey, right? And we balance that whole thing is a thing that doesn't happen. We really work to keep things in harmony. And so myself right now, I find myself in a life stage that doesn't include a lot of sleep, and I'm sacrificing a lot for little people, and that's okay, because seasons change, right? And so if you're sitting on this call and you're like, I just can't do that right now, we want you to have grace upon grace upon grace for yourself. And we want to give you things that you can implement. So often I find that if we add in the things that bring us results and that are fun to do and bring us joy, then when we're asking ourselves to kind of change some things up, and sometimes that's the removal, it's better to add in and start getting those results first before we pull things away, right? And so just pick one thing that will put you further tomorrow than where you are today, and that will be a win. Don't get off of this class and go to your husband or to your teenage kids, like as my case, and hey, I just learned this thing and I'm going to pull away, whatever your favorite deal is. That is not the way to win them over to this lifestyle, or for yourself or for your friends. And so know that about your personality, because I can definitely speak from a place of experience. And like Ali was saying at the beginning of this, everything that I do today is something that I said I would never do. And so hopefully we've changed that up a little bit, but I get it. If you're clinging tightly to your candles, I'm going to explain a little bit why you might not want to do some of those things. Because for me, when those hard changes are asked of myself, if I have the head knowledge as to why I'm doing that thing, sometimes it's easier to stay in the game. And it's so funny, speaking from the parenthood's perspective, that oftentimes what we won't start in doing for ourselves, we will turn around and thereby do for our children. And so that's why I loved in practice that I did work with so many pregnant moms, because their ears were wide open in that season when they might not have been before. And so know that your choices, depending on, where you find yourself, if it's not parenthood, it affects the circles of people around you. And so we're going to talk about that too. But we really want to simplify. And so again, adding in those things first and foremost. And so before you look at where can I pull things away, talk about where could I add something good in that I might not be doing right now. Simplifying. And so on our team, we talk a lot about like pick a room in your household that you want to start the ditch and switch in. Maybe it's not that. Maybe you just want to start with a morning routine and you want to do it across the board for your whole family. Or maybe there's a person in the family, yourself or somebody else, that you really want to focus on that person first. And so just really little steps at a time. That's the whole adage about how we eat the elephant, right? Is one bite at a time, because we're fully aware that it can be overwhelming, and especially when we get into a big subject like this. Also, we know that there's so much that we can't control, but for the fact that there's a lot that we can, that's why we have this conversation. And in this whole oily world, natural lifestyle, crunchy, whatever label you want to put on it, the thing that we tend to affect directly is the hormone system. And it's easier to build something in a healthy way than it is to have to go back and correct it, right? We've all had those correction points in our life. And so you will find that all of us on here sharing this information get super passionate about hormones, because it's something that we have seen a direct effect on from the changes and the choices that we choose to make. So just simplifying this across the board, no matter what gender we're talking to, stage, age, all those things. If you're like, okay, where can I start? Young Living gives us premium starter kits to start there for a reason. Most of you came into this, if you already have your oils, with one of those kits. If not, then again, talk to the person that invited you. But the way that I would simplify that, sometimes we get so used to something that we take it for granted, or we need to revisit using that. And so maybe this information is review for you. And so what I would say is grab that premium starter kit. Tends to be 12 oils, depending on when you started. That may be a little bit different. And then if you're sharing with somebody, hey, I was on this great class and they gave us a really simple way that you could start affecting your hormones. There's going to be some samples of Ningxia Red in there. We love Ningxia. They'll put up a slide and a little bit of some of my top suggestions. And so definitely grab those Ningxia packs and refrigerate them. But on top of that premium starter kit, there's really 3 ideally oils that I would have you add on to that additionally. And if you don't want to add orange, because orange is one of those 3, then you could use your Citrus Fresh blend that is included in one of those 12. But ideally we want orange, and I'll explain why that is really important. And then a favorite blend that you'll hear us talk a lot about, that you're probably like, man, they mention that all the time. And I'll tell you why that is in a little bit, but it's EndoFlex. They actually, in that kit, give you some rollers, and most people put it on their stress away, but grab your EndoFlex and put that roller on there. It will make your life so much easier. Tip, if something is easy, meaning pleasurable, easy button for mom, like that's all my pleasure right there, make it easy. You're going to just human nature run towards something that gives you pleasure and run away from pain, right? And so if I want to implement a new routine and not overwhelm myself, I'm going to make it easy. And so that roller top is one way that you can do that. Those fitments from Young Living are awesome. They fit on all size bottles, and they just make that topical application of it really, really simple and easy and pleasurable for the busy life that a lot of us lead. And that's why you want that EndoFlex, because it's going to help you so much with those stress levels. And then after that orange and the EndoFlex, the other one that I would add on is cedarwood. If you have cedarwood and you're listening to these classes, it is a great one to breathe in. Did you know that there's research that shows that we retain things? And so as your kids go back into school, maybe you're in school studying for something, or just listen to these classes and you want to retain that information. We retain things better when we inhale. So encourage yourself to breathe in deeply, and you can do that with your oils. And so that's just your little random tip that doesn't have to do with hormones, but that cedarwood really, really helps with memory retention. And if we study something and then test with the same scent, your sense of smell, that olfactory nerve, has so much to do with your memory. And so that will help you on your testing too. And so utilize that information when you're taking classes like this, so that you can recall that stuff. So they're going to be cedarwood, orange, and EndoFlex. The reason why I say to add those into your premium starter kit Those oils in that kit are phenomenal. Digize is going to be one for digestion. Now, why in the world would I talk about digestion when we talk about hormones? We're going to hit on this a lot. We'll talk about gallbladder and liver. That's all part of your digestive system. Your brain, actually, all of those chemicals that you use in there, and yes, your hormones, they all start in your gut. And so most of us have some digestive stress as we age. That tends to increase. And so if I just took this class and was like, hey, you came for hormones, but we're going to make a, real quick turn and we're just going to talk about digestion, you would be better hormonally getting off of this call, making smart digestive choices, because that digestive system is really considered your second brain. I pretty much think of them as one and the same. And so grab that premium starter kit, the Digize in there, and start rubbing it on your stomach when you think of it at least once a day, if not 2 to 3 times. And that will help start to help get some harmony to your good and bad bacteria and balance out that system. And then we're going to see neurochemistry changes from that, where all the brain chemicals change and your hormones start to change up just by nature of supporting that. Cedarwood, besides those little tips that I mentioned on listening to a class, they have done research on breast cancer and how melatonin affects that. Now, what is stimulating that? It not only helps us fall asleep, but when we sleep, our body tends to do good things with that. And so there is a concept that I use in parenting mainly, but we can use it for marriage, we can use it for health. And so I want to talk about that with this research study. Anytime we look at something, especially in the Western world, and as you'll hear us teaching this class, you'll find that we have the approach to this. Many of you come on here and we get the questions all day long, and I chuckled about it in a nice way yesterday, but we will tell you our goal in these classes, like she put up that little sign before we got on that was like, we're not here to diagnose, treat, or cure. We want you guys to get to a point where you understand your body system, where you have body autonomy, to where you not only understand it, but you make choices for what you feel is best for your body as a parent, even as a grandparent, even with the people that you have relationship with in your circles. You own your body and are given your body for a reason, because you are the best for that. And so in our Western mindset, if you're in the US, unfortunately, I find this a pervasive thing that's happening outside of the US now too, that we didn't used to find before. We love, for some reason, to hand over our power, and we want to have somebody else research it for us. And I want somebody to put a label on what I'm experiencing. Guys, those diagnoses, the only reason they're there, that we put verbiage on something, is in order to treat them. And so what happens is we get in this mindset, and even after saying it after yesterday's class, I came to my DMs. My text messages were blowing up. Hey, I have this. How do I? And we're constantly in this treatment mindset. Yet when we go back and say, okay, if the body is meant to have certain things foundationally in order for it to do XYZ, it has to have building blocks. Are we doing that? And so many times when we're wanting to address these things that we have put labels on, we're not even doing the basic building blocks that are required in the way we're created for health. Oftentimes we're putting things in that are toxins that were meant to be kept out. And so why is it that instead of knowing like, hey, what is required for health, both in coming in and keeping out, we don't want to do those things. We just automatically want to put a Band-Aid over symptoms that by nature are there to yell at us, hey, take care of the system. And we find ourselves needing this endocrine support, which is why I'm such a huge fan of this guy. And when we talk to people about hormones, guaranteed, because I get it tonight on my Insta stories. Yesterday, it was a big buzz hot word: thyroid, 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 thyroid. You are hard to find somebody in your circle who isn't dealing with some sort of thyroid. And then with guys, but unfortunately it's happening with the females too. What's popping up around our areas everywhere? Low T centers. It's not the testosterone that's our problem. It's the fact that we have put our bodies under stress after stress after stress, when that stress is meant to be short term, like, jump up, I'm running from a tiger, or there was this loud noise that's telling me to get away from something. But what do we do in our culture and the system that we live in? No matter where you're at, it's stress after stress after stress after stress. And then eventually the body says, tap, I'm out. Like, I'm going to yell uncle, because I'm not getting the things that I need foundationally in the first place. And then you're adding on more stress than you're allowing me to be equipped to handle. And then you're allowing so many things in that aren't meant to be there in the first place. And we're not taking care of that. And so the way that we can address so many issues that you come to this class with, regardless of whether you're cycling or not, where you're at in that cycle, if you're a male and you don't have a cycle, let's just talk about the foundational things that apply across the board, because organ systems, your body in general, have a role. if you don't use it, you lose it. And if you abuse it, you lose it. And so what do we find with this? We'll take thyroid since we talked about that. People who are on prescriptions. And again, you make the choice that's best for you. Sometimes you're like, hey, I have, family members who are in this situation right now. They're like, I know the work that it takes to get there, and I could do this to regain health, but I'm just not willing to make that choice right now. And so we're going to go this other route. And so we all have a choice in that. And I want people to have a choice, but knowing how the body works, if we say have a surgery and we remove an organ, your body is created with everything that it needs. And just because you're a certain age doesn't mean that it's time for that organ to be, thrown aside. But how often do we do that? Same thing with the medication, or if we're putting something else in, the beauty of our oils is that they come in and support the system. And so they're not doing the work for it. But if we take a prescription over time, and we see this with hormones all the time, what eventually happens with that organ? Our bodies are smart. And so if it's coming in easily from the outside, why am I going to do the work on the inside to produce that? I'm not. And so over time, we may see that organ atrophy. We may see that medication need to increase and increase and increase, just because that is the way that those things work. And so if we don't use it, if I don't exercise, what happens? We lose it. If we abuse it, we lose it. And so those are the same concepts that you can basically understand. And so with that reverse parenting, I look at what are characteristics in adults that I want my kids to end up with, and I back it up and I say, okay, on a daily basis, what are some things that I can do now with my 1-year-old, with my 5-year-old, with my 10-year-old, in order to get the end result that I want? And so when I look at a reductionistic study, knowing that I can't just in my mindset frame, hey, this is breast cancer or my breast, because they don't function individually by themselves. There's so many other things at stake. And so how can I make the whole body as a whole? Why are we finding this research that melatonin has a role in that? It is because with sleep, it is something that our body requires specifically for our immune system to be healthy, and what things stimulate that. And so if we know, I don't know about you, but especially in the season that I'm in right now, sometimes sleep is hard to come by. And there can be variants of that. Maybe it's hard getting there. Maybe it's hard, there. Maybe you're sleeping, but it's just not deep. And so if we know that there's an issue with that, add in cedarwood. It's an easy change, and that can stimulate melatonin. And then look at all of the things that we can do for our hormones. And so I know off of that research that sleep is not only important with that, but it's affecting hormones. And so that's awesome that we can add that on to that premium starter kit. And that is an easy change. Just throw something in my diffuser. Everybody in the room that it's diffusing around is getting the benefits from that, which is another reason that we love our oils. And how many times it's so much more than double, but double bang for our buck on these products, because we can use them on different family members and for different reasons, and get awesome effects when we use our plants for support. Okay, why did I say Endoflex? I briefly mentioned that, and I'll tell you guys use. I harp on this all the time. If my team's on there, they're going to be shaking their head yes. But this guy comes in some other kits besides our premium starter kit. It is an unsung hero that people aren't utilizing enough. We can use it across all stages. When we talk hormones with moms, especially with little kids, but even moms with pregnancy and nursing, and then sometimes into menopause, and sometimes the guys, we, especially younger ages, I hear it all the time. Like, they'll come to me with the babies and they're like, how can I, help little Johnny's digestive system? And then we'll talk about, like, how can I help little Susie's skin? And we have all these questions, but what they don't question with the kids is hormones, because we think we're going to deal with those later. And then in the later ages, they're like, I don't know, where to do that, because I don't have a lab test. And so what I love about Endoflex is it supports that endocrine system. As we go through milestones, I talk a lot about leap years, because leap stages in kids, but there are times when our neurology is making these leaps and we're growing, and we have those at all stages, right? There's then, like, if stress is added into your life, you don't have to be an age for that to affect you, but that endocrine system is what is going to be pulled on and required more of during those times. 2020, we all needed like vats of this, right? But so often, because we're again in that Western mindset of like, I don't want to treat stuff and I don't want to throw hormones off on my kids, we shy away from supporting their hormonal system when that system needs support all ages. And so that's why I love this guy. The easiest way to use it in the middle of a tantrum, you better believe. And sometimes that's my kids and sometimes that's me. We're rolling this on, but just supportive wise, if we don't have specific symptoms on this, grab it. And then when you wake up in the morning, set it by where you brush your teeth. Hopefully you're doing that in the morning, and hopefully it's the way that you can empower your kids to do that themselves. I'm not a DIYer. And so the job that I can hand off to my kids, they love making it fun. And so my daughter, she loves that DIY. That's how God sanctifies me, right? He gives me kids who love things that I don't. And so when she's wanting to make a roller, I'm like, hey, go, do that with Endoflex. But whoever it is in the morning, when you wake up with that routine, rub it over like where the Adam's apple would be found, which is your thyroid. And so if you have the roller on it, you can do that straight. If you're sitting here listening to me and you're like, I am under a lot of stress, we can tell when sleep is being affected. If you go outside and you need your sunglasses right away because the sun bothers you, that's a sure telltale sign of adrenal stress. If we're testing heart rate, or temperature wise, like if your hands and feet are always cold, if for females, if you're cycling, if we have menstrual issues, for guys, if there's any, we talked about before getting on this call so much, and I find it that it's outside of an age range anymore, which is sad because it tells us the stress level. But if we're needing blue pills for things to function, if for females, there's any fertility issues with that, or we're coming off of major changes, whether that's pregnancy or nursing, those are all times when we would want to support that endocrine system, and specifically when we can find adrenals under stress. And so you may need a little bit more of this than what you're using topically. So you could use it topically, and then under your tongue, it's got spearmint in it. It is the Vitality, smells great, tastes great. So first thing in the morning, if you're doing it topically over that thyroid area, and then right at your rib cage where it ends in the back where somebody would kidney punch you because those adrenals sit under your kidneys on both sides, go ahead and rub it there. If you find yourself just needing more of that adrenal support too, Gary talked about this a lot, and he used cypress for it for circulation, but you could do this with any oil topically. When we bring more blood flow to an organ, it's just going to function better. And the easiest way that we can do that without needing another person is by vigorously massaging it, like really get in there. And so what I love to do with Endoflex, or you can add cypress on if you have it. Nutmeg is another great one. Rosemary is another one too. And so I'm not trying to complicate this. If you're just starting out, just stick with your Endoflex. But you can put that on and then go over the kidney area and massage it really, really vigorously. And again, at any age, any gender, any stage, you can do that and get benefits from it because we all need that endocrine support. What happens and why you hear about the thyroid so much, especially as we age, is that in that initial stress, if it's the loud noise, if it's the thing that you're trying to run away from, whatever it is, short term, the adrenal glands are meant to handle that, right? And so they're supposed to throw out that cortisol. But what we have found ourselves in is that stress is staying and staying and staying. It's usually harsher and harder than it's meant to be, that we're created for, because most of us are living in too stressed out of an environment, even at our most relaxed state. And so over time, that thyroid gets the stress. The adrenals get the stress over and over again. And then eventually they tap out and say, I got to pull in the thyroid, because the thyroid's meant to take over long term after it hasn't been short term dealt with the adrenals. And then eventually what happens, that thyroid's like, I need to really pull in some help. And that's why we are seeing that stress so prevalent compared to what it used to be. So that Endoflex will hit that across the board. The orange, the reason why I mentioned it, Google orange and glutathione. If you haven't heard that before, somebody can type it in the chat, but you will be amazed if you're a geek and geek out on that stuff like me. You will like to read that. But all you need to know about orange, it smells great. And so it's a phenomenal one to have. If you just were like, hey, how can I do a simple detox? Because maybe you're not, willing yet to add in all the supplements that you need, or maybe you're not willing to turn around diet stuff yet. And you're like, just tell me one small change. Grab some citrus oils from that premium starter kit. And so if you've added orange, that's great. If not, your citrus fresh or your lemon, or if you want to change it up, you can do a combo of those. Tangerine, grapefruit is great too. And just add a drop or two of those into your water. We were talking at the beginning of this call about drinking water. Our Vitality drops that Tina was mentioning have those oils in them, and they have electrolytes, which are phenomenal to balance too. And so you could totally do that. But how awesome that we get the effects of our citrus. And the reason why we want that is because it is a low level, awesome detox. And so sometimes we're just not going to get the things that we need in the day. And so that's not only going to help us to fill in the gaps, but it's going to clean up where we need it to, and it's not going to keep us in the bathroom all day long. And orange specifically, we want to work on the liver. Why? Because your liver is what is going to help you process those hormones. And so again, I don't want to add in things or treat, whether that's, medication or take stuff out, if I'm not making sure that where it's supposed to go through and where the body is supposed to absorb things and spread it out isn't doing its job, then we have an issue. And most of us will guaranteed need that liver to have some extra support and help it be cleaned out. You've likely heard of a gallbladder, because if there's a thyroid thing, then what's the next thing that we hear about? People taking that gallbladder out. Gallbladder and liver are pretty much the same organ. We can't take the liver out and be in good shape. And so what's the next best solution? The gallbladder's smaller, and they figured out ways that we can live without it. And so they take that out. So many of the things that we do to address hormone imbalances synthetically and with chemicals affect the gallbladder. And so birth control is another one that we hear about all the time. Guaranteed way to stress out that gallbladder, liver, put someone on birth control. And so again, if you are one of those taking that, or you know someone that is, you need to go back to the person that you worked on getting on that with and work through those things. But it is really hard because, like Ali mentioned yesterday, a healthy person is a fertile person. And so if we want to put in a chemical that's going to affect fertility, again, we can't reduce our body and act in a reductionist way, because we are a whole unit. And so we're going to see other things affected. B vitamins is something that as a country, and I can speak for countries outside of the US, most of us are chronically deficient in. In the US, it tends to be worse because we fortify our food and we love to, when we eat sweet things, make it packaged. When you go for sweets that's like a fruit, not only do you have the sugars in there, but you typically have the B vitamins in that, because the whole food is put together in a perfect way so that it digests itself. Well, what happens when we have something packaged? Not only sometimes the fortification isn't there, but when they fortify those sugars that you're craving with B vitamins, it's not usually a way that your body can work with that B vitamin. And so we get more and more deficient with that, and stress just amplifies it. And a lot of gene mutations, which are abounding in our population, amplify that. And so oftentimes things that you are experiencing are because of a B vitamin deficiency, because of the lifestyles that we live. But then we want to add on something like a birth control that further, takes away from that already depleted system with those B vitamins, which are needed, just like the enzymes that we'll chat about in a little bit, in everything that your body does. And so why would I be like, hey, I'm going to stay on the birth control and just take a B vitamin? It doesn't work that way. And so if you study things and know, like, hey, I'm in this stage that she's talking about that need B vitamins and that could likely be deficient in that, and then you're taking birth control, that may be something that you want to research and talk to your provider about and see where you have peace on that. But it is a chronic thing with that, and something that definitely adds to that stress. And so grab that orange oil, regardless of the choices you're making. Again, this is something that you can do on any stage, because we're in the summer and our citrus oils, bergamot, you're going to find this with too. And so like when we talk about Progessence Plus, this is one. Just make sure that you're putting it in an area that you can cover up, or that you're not going to directly expose to sun for about 24 to 48 hours, because we can get some sun sensitivity with that. And so that's not fun. But massaging that orange over your liver, as well as taking it in your water. And so it's going to help with liver and all the things that we want it producing, which is what I was telling you to Google. But we'll see hormonal changes with that, just because we're helping to clear up the system and give it some extra support that is going to help us to filter through and process those hormones. And most of us, as we age, we're going to see stress in that area. And so that's why I was saying that orange is a great thing to add in. If you don't add that to, in your premium starter kit came with Citrus Fresh. Citrus Fresh also, it's one of our blends, has spearmint in it, which is fantastic for the thyroid. And so you could totally use that Citrus Fresh, like we talked about with Endoflex, and then you could add it in your water. You could do it sublingually and those things too. Ali will talk about it when she gets to muscle testing, but if we're using things topically and you're like, hey, that's just not cutting it for me, regardless of how things are labeled, I would recommend that if you're teaching a class or posting something on social media, stick to what the label instructs you to do. But in your own home, like I was saying, you're the parent for a reason. You have your body for a reason, because you know best. Try things out, because because that's the only way when we're talking plants that you're going to know what it does with your body. We'll mention things on these calls that are our favorite that we've had good results with. I'm teaching you, yes, but it's a testimonial. And so Allie may have a totally different thing, or Tina may have something that she says, and I'm like, oh, that's not what I find. It's because all of our bodies work different, and these plants are going to come in and not force their way into making things work a certain way. They're just going to support your system. And so sometimes that means that it's going to be a different function for me than it is for them. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. You're comfortable with your kit. You've added on those few oils. You're doing that consistently and you're not overwhelmed. And so what do? We can start with teens, because this would be a good thing to start with as we're thinking healthy hormones. And then a lot of this, we can just, move on through life, keeping these habits the same, because we've always done them and they're good, right? And so enzymes, really, really, really important. Again, depending on what diet you are finding is working best for you, we may find it a little bit more deficient. And so we know that if like food is in its perfect form, raw tends to have more enzymes, but sometimes as our digestive system is more stressed out, we can't do raw. And then as we age, those enzymes get less and less. Every body system that we need to work uses enzymes in order to have the energy and the fuel to do its action. And so if you are eating the perfect things for you, but you're not absorbing the nutrients out of that, then how much good is it going to do us? Probably not. And so enzymes not only make sure that we feel our best, but they're helping us to not waste money too, right? And so it is not a bad thing at all to get your kids started with enzymes. Some of our enzymes, our Allerzyme and our Detoxzyme, are smaller too. And so those are great ones with our kids to help them to practice learning how to swallow pills. And so you can totally do that. But again, we have a variety of enzymes because we want to give options, but I know that can be overwhelming. And so if you're like, I'm new to this, which one should I start with? Our Essential Zymes 4, really simple to do. We leave the packets out on our table. When we travel, we stick them in our bags, and you can just tear off one. It's 2 little pills that you take with a meal. What those, and the reason why they have the number 4 on them do is they help you to digest and absorb and break down your food. The reason why the number 4 on there is because of macronutrients. And so if you're sitting there like, there's carbs, there's fats, there's proteins, Gary added in a 4th, which was fiber. And so know that the 4 is talking about breaking things down, and we want to do that when we're eating. In between our meals, we'll take Essential Zymes. And so try for a few days. I would go like a month on one. I would start out with the Essential Zymes 4 and just note how you feel. In between our meals, when you want to try the next thing, you could totally stay on those. Or if you're like, I want to try something different and see how that does, do the Essential Zymes. Research why Gary did the Essential Zymes and developed them like he did and what clinics he used them in. And you'll know if you want some things in your body that are there and have been there a while and you want to absorb them and get rid of them. And so as we age, that Essential Zymes, as we have symptoms, Essential Zymes becomes all the more important. And that may be when you want to take those on board. But when we're talking hormones, we have got to be able to absorb that nutrition and to deal with the junk that's already there and get things moving in order for this system to be healthy. And so it may surprise you, but that's why we harp on this digestive system a whole lot. And so yes, you with the teens, you could absolutely get them in the habit of doing that enzyme, especially if diet is lacking in some seasons or stages, then that would be helpful with that too. Ningxia Red, all those citrus oils that we mentioned are infused into our supplements. And so if you're taking, say, a B vitamin or a vitamin C from another company, or even enzymes, the reason why I noticed when I switched to our Young Living products such a difference, even though I'm like comparing the labels, I'm like, hey, it's pretty much the same. When we infuse things with oils, especially our oils that are seed to seal, there is such a vast difference in how they work. And so I would just tell you, try it and see what you think, because it makes such a difference. And so if there is an option for me on something that I'm taking to have it oil infused, I am all there. And so not only the oils that are in Ningxia Red, but it is phenomenal at blood sugar balance, which is also key with making sure that our hormonal system functions the way that it needs to. Circulation can be vastly improved with Ningxia Red. Something that we find, especially as we move towards the cycling years, and then during those cycling years, women tend to really suffer from anemia. That can come from 2 places: blood loss, just naturally as that occurs once a month, but also from a deficiency in those B vitamins like we mentioned. And so adding things in that help that circulatory system. If a guy is finding that he needs help with circulation, again, Ningxia Red would be a foundational thing that we're going to go in and support that system with on males. And so across the board, love, love, love Ningxia Red. It's something that in my midwifery practice, we were constantly talking about with our pregnant and nursing moms, because it's just that foundational nutrition. My kids love it too. And so what a great thing to get their body used to, hey, if we take in good nutrition, this is how we feel. So then on the weeks when they have camp and I want them to go experience the world so that they don't go crazy wild, when they get out on their own, because mom always kept this stuff away from me, hopefully they're going to get the natural consequence of, I took in the junk and this is what it made me feel like. I don't want that anymore. And so it is chock full of antioxidants and awesome nutrition. And so foundationally, that is a great one. Super B, another one when we're talking about hormones, because of what I just said, most of us are vastly deficient in that. If there's some gene mutations involved, it typically affects our B vitamins and our need for that. And so adding that in would be another great one. Multigreens, it has bee pollen in it. So fantastic for energy, not to mention all of the greens in there that are going to help with the liver, also, like we mentioned, in the kidney. And then mineral essence. We do a funny thing on our team where we do a challenge. I'm like, who can take it straight and not make a face and hold it? And so if you need something fun to compete with either your team or your kids, that's a good one. But there is a reason, just like Digest, that when you hear us saying like, hey, you should totally take mineral essence, hey, Digest is awesome, and then you're like, should I trust these people? Because I wouldn't throw that in my diffuser. There's a reason. If we harp about it, and there's all these people on this call who are like, yeah, it's because it works. That's the only reason why we would put up with something that tastes like that or smells like that. And guess what? After you've used it a while and you start getting all these good results from it, you might find that you like the taste or you like the smell. That's because your body has a good association with it now of like, I know how that thing makes me feel. And so mineral essence, when we're talking about hormones, is a fantastic one to add in there too. And multigreens, if you're just starting with this and you're like, I don't know where to start, just pick one or two that we talk about on this call, stick with it. And then as you get good results, you can add other things in. Okay, if you want to know what your cycle is doing, because ideally you could work with a provider, not so that they can tell you what to do, but sometimes we just need somebody to help us have a roadmap to know how to read our body, right? But in no other time like today have I seen when somebody wants the education and wants to know their body is the information out there. Not only do you guys have classes like this, resources, grab a desk reference, because so many times there's so much information coming at us that we're just like, I'm going to sit here, not do a thing, not know what to do. That desk reference is paramount, because you guys have already invested your time in getting on this call, your time and products. And so we want to make sure that you can use those, and that desk reference will help you so much. But you can track your cycle just with looking, and you can Google what your temperatures are doing. That'll tell you if your endocrine system is getting, good love from the things that you're doing, or it needs a little bit more. It'll tell you, hey, am I in the time at the first part of my cycle from my period starting to the ovulation, which is called our follicular phase. And then when we ovulate, and you can know when this is happening by what mucus is doing, by what temperature is doing. There's tons of different ways. Like I said, just Google. There's a great book called Taking Charge of Your Fertility, where you can help work with your fertility and not put yourself in an unhealthy place if that's not a season for you and growing your family. But that ovulation all the way until that period starts again is known as your luteal phase. Okay. And so the first part, that follicular time, is going to be when estrogen is naturally higher. And so what does that mean? When you go through in that EODR, or you're looking at the ingredients in these supplements or these oils, and things have a supportive nature to estrogen, then that's the time that you're going to want to stick with that. When we ovulate all the way until that next bleeding cycling menses starts again, typically it's going to be progesterone that's higher in there. When a pregnancy occurs, in order to maintain that, the way that the body doesn't start that period over again is progesterone stays high. So if somebody has been supporting their progesterone with Progestins Plus and they got the results that they wanted because they're pregnant, I don't want them to all of a sudden go, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm going to get off the Progestins Plus. No, we want to keep on with that because our body is enjoying that progesterone supportive nature with that. And so we want to stay on those things. And it's always so funny to me me because when we go, to talk about this, and especially when people know my background, they're like, what do you tell people when they're pregnant? What do you tell them when you're nursing? I tell them it's not a sick condition. And so when we're using plants and things to support that, things that I did before, how funny is it that people will, lather themselves in whatever lotion and use these shampoos and light these candles and all the things that we know that tend to drive hormones haywire and have all these chemicals in them that I wouldn't want around a growing baby. But yet, when it's like the natural thing that I want to add in to support my body system, now we want to know, all the dangerous things. And so with this, the reason why I mentioned where you're at in the typical cycle, if you don't know, the beauty of Progestance Plus is it's a serum, it has our oils in it. And so you don't have to know where you're at in your cycle, and you can use that the whole time through. And most people do and find great support with that. But if you're like, really, I want to get really particular and hone in on this and support these systems, I wouldn't myself use the estrogen supporting stuff until I was out of my cycle, or if I knew from symptoms that I was specifically needing more estrogen support. And the reason why I say that, and so your things that you're going to find supporting more of that estrogen are going to be stuff like your clary sage in there. I prefer EndoFlex over EndoGize, but some people love the EndoGize and they get great results with it. And so that's where you're going to know your body best. But most of the things that we deal with environmentally are stimulating estrogen. It's not the kind of estrogen that we want stimulated. And so the great thing about our plants is that, again, you're not going to harm things. You might get some symptoms that you don't like for a little bit if you go, the wrong direction with this, but that's why you're meant to pay attention to what your body is doing and then support that. As we get out of that cycle and when we go towards the peri, which means around menopause. So perimenopause is like around it. And we start seeing the cycles, not normal. Maybe we're having some vaginal dryness with stuff. Sometimes maybe our breasts are changing and getting, lumps and bumps and all those things. All of those tell us that our estrogen is dropping off a little bit. And then into full menopause, we get a larger drop of the estrogen and the progesterone because we're seeing those. And then testosterone in a male will drop as he ages too. But in all of us, we have testosterone levels. And so the team, as we're preparing this class, is probably sick of me saying it, but I'm like, PowerGize is phenomenal, both for females and men. And again, it's an underutilized thing because so many people are like, that's for athletes. I'm not a power lifter. I'm not going to go taking the PowerGize. Tribulus, fantastic for supporting testosterone. And so if you have somebody who wants to support that system, both male and female need it. But then we have other endocrine supporting herbs in there, plus our oils, which just make it a powerhouse. And so if you haven't tried it, try it and see how it does for you. Again, if it throws things haywire symptom-wise, then you're like, okay, it's not for me. But sometimes, and those of you who have tried Progestance Plus know that we need to try it for a little bit. And then as it's leveling out, you may get those symptoms where you're like, hey, I was moody or I had a headache. And so that's where you may want to work through with a provider to see how you stay on that stuff. Later into our cycling years and then into perimenopause and menopause, you could really use it the whole way through. But I find that people don't need it until they're like, mid-30s most of the time, unless there's other things. Femigen is another great support. And then as we get older, especially for the males, that circulatory support, CardioGize is phenomenal and an unsung hero with that. And so try those. Again, if you make any of the one changes of the things that we have talked on here, you'll probably see some phenomenal results. And then that's when you'll be ready to add on more things. So I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, is it Tina or Allie that's going next? Okay.
Hey guys.
And then I'll go look at the questions to see if we
so much, Dr. Cindy.
You're so welcome.
So good. And just from yesterday's class, I've learned so much more. So I'm Tina, and I am not going to take much of your time up because I want to just tell you kind of how my story plays into what Dr. Cindy was talking about. So early in my adolescent years, back in the 80s, I had horrific cycles. I would lose up to 10 pounds within just 2 to 3 days from cramps and diarrhea and vomiting, headaches, all the mood swings and everything. And so at 17, my mother took me to a gynecologist who, guess what, did what they did in the 80s, which I think they're still doing, is they put me on birth control pills. And that regulated and balanced my hormones. And so what we know now is that actually contributed to some of the xenoestrogens that I had absorbed over the years. And then as I entered into my adulthood, I became a professional salon owner and a nail tech. And I was the daughter of a hairstylist. I am the daughter of a hairstylist. She's retired now. but I have been around chemicals my whole life. And so more synthetic chemicals that can influence estrogen. And so then I fortunately had two very healthy pregnancies with and birthed two daughters. But as I have gotten older, back in when I was 45, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition called fibromyalgia. And so when I started unpacking that in a natural way, I did not want all the medications because we have a strong pattern of addiction in my family. And pretty much everything the doctor was offering for me for fibromyalgia medication wise had addiction properties to it. So I said no to all of that. I started really praying about it, hitting my knees and just trying to find out the natural things. I was so far from being natural, had probably taken a handful of supplements in my lifetime. And so I was that standard American person eating the processed foods. When I was an adolescent, that's when TV dinners and microwave meals were all the rage. My mom was a single mom. So I was a latchkey kid and it was microwave meals. So that processed food, had chronic sinusitis most of my life. I was a strep throat carrier, so had strep all the time, and ended up having two sinus surgeries. And so you can imagine the amount of antibiotics that I've had in my body. So what does all of that sound like? It sounds like what we just typically do when we have things going on in our body. But what it was really doing is every choice I was making, every choice that was being made for me was leaning towards that autoimmune problem. So when you look at autoimmune, you didn't get that way overnight. It was a series of choices, a series of circumstances that led you to it. So what I had been working on is I started on foods that cause inflammation. That's typically wheat, sugar, processed foods, your sodas, all of that kind of stuff. So I just really started making baby steps and removing a lot of that stuff from my diet. And I had results. And so I've worked on my microbiome with the gut. I started working on that liver, just like Dr. Cindy was talking about, orange over your liver, orange in your water, your citrus oils everywhere, every day. And then, of course, the enzymes. I take a ton of enzymes. I take Life9 probiotic at night. I get Master Formula every single day. There's a big 15 milligrams of zinc in Master Formula. We all need the zinc. Zinc's been a big supplement that people have been talking about in the last 15 months or so. And men especially need zinc. So Master Formula covers a lot of that stuff, and you can get that in one little package in the morning. It's super easy. Grab it, put it in your purse, take it on your way out the door. Super B, like Dr. Cindy was talking about, and I typed in the chat, but I take 2 Super B in addition to the Master Formula, which has Super B and has B vitamins in it. Ningxia Red, I take the Ningxia Zinc and Nitro, more B vitamins. So many things that I take throughout the day. And guess what? I'm 53. I'm postmenopausal and I have no symptoms. I have no hot flashes. None of the things that people say, are you not like fighting with all of these symptoms? And I'm just not. One thing that we do address with Sensation Massage Oil is just dryness. And if you are experiencing dryness and you're using a lubricant that has a petrochemical in it that is petroleum jelly based, stop using it now, because you're introducing even more xenoestrogens, even more toxins into your body, and some of those mucus layers that are absorbing it quicker than anything else. So make sure that when you're looking through some of the things that you may have been wondering, like, why am I having these issues? Working on these root things that Dr. Cindy has talked about is all the difference in the world. If like right now, my girls are 20 and 23, not one issue with their cycles, not one. I was poised and ready for them to have problems. But the good thing is, through their adolescent years, we have been healthy. We have been eating healthy. They've been supplemented. They've been drinking their Ningxia Red. We've addressed gut health, liver health. They haven't had the xenoestrogens. We, when they started their cycles, we only use organic products like tampons and panty liners and pads, and they even tried the menstruation cups. And so all of those little choices add up to what symptoms that you may or may not be having. Unpack it one little baby step at a time. I just want to encourage you with it. Get out of the mindset of what oil is good for hot flashes. yes, we want to cool down. Peppermint spray is a good one DIY to make. I'll type out in the comments about that. Or maybe Leah or Teresa can do that for us. But you can address some of the uncomfortable situations as you're going along, but please look at this from a foundational point of view and work on those foundations. And I promise you, those things are going to resolve themselves. So I encourage you with that. And I'm going to toss it over to Allie. She's got some great information to talk to us about her experience as well.
Hi. So I'm going to tell you a quick story about my my hormone journey. So I am a third generation woman who dealt with cysts on my ovaries and my uterus. And this started for me in high school. It happened to my grandmother who had a full hysterectomy. It happened to my mother who had a full hysterectomy at now my age. I'm now 45. And I actually was put on birth control as a teenager. And then I started down the natural route and I started studying natural health and I started detoxing my diet, detoxing my life in every way. So the food, the skincare, the cleaning products, everything. And then along came essential oils, where I was able to do a lot of regulating that I still was like struggling with not being fully regular. And so for me, the game changers were, I'm sorry, I'm trying to shut down all the noisemakers here on my computer. The game changers were things that were already talked about, but I'm going to just show you my personal regimen, because people always ask, what is your regimen? So Cindy mentioned Endoflex. When I started this, I needed a lot of help. Like my thyroid was jacked, my hormones were jacked. So I was doing the under the tongue and the capsule. Now I just roll it on my neck and on my lower back, just for maintenance mode, happy mom mode. And then I use Progessence Plus every night. And I personally don't put a roller fitment on this because I kind of like to see how much I'm using. When I originally started, I did. And then I realized I kind of want to see like how many drops I'm using. This one is a little bit more important to see like what your body is needing. And I'm going to get into that in just a second. And then for me, if I have any kind of cramping during my cycle or breakouts or anything like that, which is not most cycles, because I try to regularly support my liver, which I find has a huge impact on menstrual cramps, by the way, is Lady Scleral is my favorite estrogen balancing oil. Dragon Thyme, Clary Sage, Fennel, so many options that we have. This is just my fave because I love the way it smells. So that's just my jam. And I just roll that on my inner ankles or my lower abdomen if I'm experiencing cramps. So that's quickly my journey. I have not had cysts since this time. I am happily intact. I'm not planning to lose any of my organs ever. So I think that's a huge win. And I mention this because it's really important that when we use our oils, like I'll say, you know, if you loan someone some Panoway or some Deep Relief and they were in pain, and then they're not in pain anymore, they don't even realize they're not in pain, right? So I don't have to think, oh, I don't have cysts, I'm not in pain. I'm just not. So we need to recognize those wins, right? This is a huge win. So now I'm going to talk about like, how do you know what to use? And I really think that so much of this journey is empowering people, right? I don't want to have to tell you what you have to do for your body. And I don't want you dependent on anyone else to tell you what to do with your body. So how do I empower you on the computer screen? A great way is muscle testing. So I'm going to very, very quickly show you the very basics of muscle testing, and then you can dig into this a lot more if you so choose. So the first thing with muscle testing is you are basically asking your body what it likes or what it doesn't like. And then you can get way more advanced and figure out how many drops or how many capsules or, you know, things like that. And you can really dig in. So the first thing is to establish what is your body's yes. And I'm going to show you how I do it. There's lots of other ways, just sharing. And for me, I stand with my feet about hips width apart. I'm very short. So when I stand up, you can probably still see my body. So I'm going to stand up and I'm going to ask myself my name. So if I say, my name is Allie Raskin, I go forward. So that is my yes. If you go backwards, then backwards is your yes. There is a way to flip it, but I'm not going to get into that today. So if I pick up an oil and I'm asking my body if I need it, I'm in my head, I do this silently now, is I'm asking my body if I need this oil. By the way, you can do this with food too. You can do this in the grocery store. You can do this in your kitchen. You can do this for anything. So it's really cool. So I'm going to just hold this. And yes, my body is liking Progessence Plus, which I usually give it at night. So that's good timing. So I'm going to do that. So this is a really good way to test yourself. I learned from Cindy yesterday that if you're, well, I'd heard that if you're testing a supplement, it's best to take it out of the plastic packaging. So if you want to stand like with instead of standing with the bottle in your hand, if it's a plastic bottle, like glass is fine. If you're testing Inner Defense or something, or Life 9, it's in glass, that works okay. But if you're testing something that comes in plastic, you can take those capsules out and put them in your hand, or you can put a capsule under your tongue without swallowing it and muscle test for it that way. And then you can swallow it if you need it, or just take it out of your mouth and do what you choose with it afterwards. So that's basically the gist of what I wanted to cover in the quick hits. I do have 2 children. I have a boy and a girl, and I just want to go back quickly to EndoFlex for a moment, because this was in the chat, but I wanted to preserve this for the video. EndoFlex is good for men and women, boys and girls, littles and olds, all the ages. And I use it on my old lady dog as well, who I think was having some thyroid issues. Possibly she was shedding a lot, and I talked to the vet and we decided that might be what's going on for her. So the same bottle that I roll on myself, I roll on my pup. I roll on I keep a roller for my children. This is just my quick tip, is that I put Thieves, Juvaflex, and EndoFlex in one roller, and that goes on my kids every day. So I kind of get all the things, the liver, the hormones, the endocrine system, and supporting their immune system. So at least I know with a couple of swipes, I'm supporting kind of all the body systems at once. I know you're not supposed to blend blends, but like, I'm real life mom, and that's just how I can get it into my kids quickly. So those are just some quick tips. And then I can, we can do what you choose to do from here. If we want to open it to questions, I know we're at the top of the hour, and we can talk about if we want to take questions or not.